and visual podcast, a weekly discussion about all things guitar building and some random tangents as well, featuring members of the Guitar Builders Collective from all around the world. The Guitar Builders Collective is a like-minded group of individuals that have come together to share their experiences, knowledge and inspiration for guitar building. Each week you can join us in the live YouTube chat or catch up at a later point. It's also available as audio where you'll miss out on seeing our lovely faces and some of the visuals we share along the way. You can also find the Guitar Builders Collective via our forum, over on Instagram where we share images of members' builds. We've got a thriving Facebook group, and we do hope that no matter what your experience and knowledge is, you'll become a welcome member of this community too. Great. Hello, people.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
So, look, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see our faces, so you'll know who's here. But if you're listening on the audio, I'll just introduce everyone. So we've got some regulars with us because we're doing our end of the month slightly different time to allow the Australians and New Zealanders and people in that hemisphere to join us. So we've got Arran from Adair Guitars at the end.
G'day.
Mr. Glyn from Mr. Glyn's Pickups. I keep calling you Mr. Glyn. Sorry. Ray from Custom Unlimited Designs. I'm trying to get up. I don't know what's happened to my computer here. We've also got Brad, BB Guitars.
Hey, yo.
And then joining us from the UK, our special guest, Joe from Hello Sailor Effects.
Hello, people.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Right.
Hi, Joe.
Let me just get some volumes balanced. So look, just before we get on with today's actual episode, a little bit of admin that hopefully will make Brad excited. I set up, I think, some T-shirts that can ship to Australia. But from what I can see, they haven't quite migrated across to the YouTube yet for you to click on to buy. But yeah, we've been making some T-shirts like this and selling them. And sort of the idea is a little bit of the profit, not you get much profit from T-shirts, goes towards supporting the podcast, or the streaming fees, etc., etc. Anyway, enough about that. Hopefully you'll be able to get them some soon, Brad.
I'll have a look now.
So I met Joe at the Brighton Guitar Show, which was it just over a month ago, Joe?
It really seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it really does. From what I can tell, I was saying to Joe off air, it seems like he's taking over the world at the moment. I'm seeing your YouTube, your reels, your shorts, people reviewing your pedals. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got all this spare time, as I said. Now I'm no longer at sea. And I've got no outlet for it, so I must be driving my wife insane.
So, look, let's find out in a minute a bit more about you and your life that's now a bit more free and the pedals. But I just want to cover some of the things that I hope we'll talk about later on so people listening now know what to look forward to. One of them is 100% the fact that I was saying it's a bit like the Tonewood debate we have with guitars. A lot of the things I've seen you discussing are using vintage capacitors, vintage components in your pedals, and people not necessarily believing it makes a difference. But I definitely want to get into that. I'm sure that's something the others have got an opinion on. And you just mentioned that you're moving house, so moving workshop. Always excited with this idea of new workshops and things.
Yeah, it's been a bit mental of late. I've got to say, I've been living out of boxes, which is interesting to say the least.
So look, what I thought I'd do is, I appreciate people on the audio won't see this, but I can share while we're talking the Instagram and your website and stuff so we can see images. But there's links to all of that in the podcast description so people can go and check that out. But Joe, maybe you could tell us a bit about your background in effects and how you got into pedals and stuff and how that relates to your work that you...
Oh, so years and years ago, I was massively into like dance music. I didn't like guitar at all. And my little brother was going to see the Coddle live. I mean, who likes the Coddle? Obviously he does. And my dad was sick, so I ended up taking him. And the sound just, that day I decided I was going to learn to play guitar. And that was it. And so I bought myself a guitar, and being the obsessive compulsive guy that I am, I also bought a tube amp, went straight in there with a Tiny Terror. It was, I had a Tiny Terror, a Tube Screamer, and EMG pickups. It was horrific. It was a terrible rig. Anyway, the first time I went to sea, it actually broke. My tiny Terror died, and I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, so refrigeration, weapon cooling systems, HVAC, stuff like that. And so electronics isn't really my thing. But of course, at sea, there's no one to help you, and there's no one going to fix this guitar amp. So I dived in, got myself a fluke, and fixed this amp, and I thought, this is amazing. I'm going to build myself an amplifier. And so I set on a path of research and that, and on the way I thought maybe I'll build an effects pedal. And that effects pedal turned into 2, which then turned into 3. Funnily enough, number 3 is behind me there. I've just traded back for it, so I've got that pedal back. This was back in 2008. Yeah, 2008. And so I started building pedals. I put a brand name to it, Hello Sailor Effects, and I just never moved on to amplifiers. And I've been building them that way ever since.
So just a quick question before we go on to the pedals and the etc. When you say you're at sea, I know this, but in case people don't know, so you have been part of the Navy for 20 years, was it you said?
22 I've done now, yeah. I've just signed on for a further 2, so it'll be 24 in total when I retire. If I don't sign on again, I mean, if my wife's listening, I'm definitely leaving the Navy, babe. She does not like that job. So, I mean, I joined the Navy on a whim. I know people plan their lives out and stuff, but I was the worst human you have ever met. Like, I was a drug addict, car thief. I was kicked out of school. I had no job. I was a deadbeat. And one of my friends from growing up tried to join the Navy, and he quit on like day 3. He left. He said it was too hard. And I was taking a mick, and he said, you couldn't do it. And I said, yes, I can. He said, no, you can't. So anyway, I come home, told my mum, I'm joining the Navy. She nearly fell on the floor. She's like, what the hell? She said, you know, they drug test you, right? Like, yeah. So then I moved in with my cousin for like 6 months, got myself clean, joined the Navy on a whim, all just to get through basic training and say to my friend, I did it, and then leave and go back to my terrible life. And then I passed out of basic training. And at the end of it, I was like, I'm 17 years old and I've exceeded my life's ambition. You know, before that, it was like, literally, I want to get to 18 and sign on a dole. That was all I wanted out of life. And I passed out the Navy and I was like, wow, I've got a career. And I just stayed in. And I didn't look back. And that's how I joined up. And then over the 22 years, I just sort of, I've chased promotion and I've enjoyed the role, but it's held back my guitar pedal building. And so now the Navy's on a back burner and I'm bringing pedals forward. And as you see, I'm everywhere at the minute. And that's because I'm trying to put out just such a big volume of stuff. I mean, this on the screen now, you can see my new website. It's currently still sort of under construction, but we're getting there. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like quite a life-changing event in your life at 17.
It was insane. I mean, let me be clear. The coral. Who would have thought? I mean, but do you know what it was? If anyone's into the coral or listen to them, the first 2 albums, the bass line, the bass line drives the rest of the song, gives the guitarist the freedom to like just play off it. It's just wonderful songwriting. And they're from pretty close to where I grew up in Liverpool, so over the water. It's not too far. Yeah.
So they were a massive band, or at least in the UK in the 90s.
Yeah, it's like, I think early 2000s they were just like everywhere, and then 2000 and I think it was maybe about 2006 they just died a death. And I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I think maybe they'll be coming back to support Oasis. Who knows?
Well, I am hanging out to get tickets for this. So my buddy Todd from the Guitar Knobs podcast messaged me yesterday and said, Joe, if you can get tickets, I'm coming to England. So he's going to come over from Ohio. So I'm going to set the whole family on trying to get me a ticket for this thing.
Amazing. Hey, for the Australians, and I appreciate that Glyn's actually a Brit living in New Zealand. Are you aware of the coral?
No, I've never heard of them. No, not me.
Not remotely.
Fair enough.
There's a song called Dreaming of You that is just literally the best. You'll understand what I mean by the bass guitar driving the song. It's fantastic.
I'll definitely check them out now, though. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I wonder how much of the sort of British rock music or Brit rock, Brit pop that we were listening to in the late 90s, 2000s actually travelled.
We were aware of Oasis down here, so we'll give you that one. They're familiar to us.
Hey, Joe, sorry. What guitar sound was it that you first heard? Because I've got this theory that the first guitar sound that you fall in love with, that you never leaves you, and that's always the thing in your head. So what was it?
I've got the exact chord. It's the first chord of All Right Now by Paul Kossoff, playing free live in Granada Studios, BBC Manchester. That gig. So I'd started playing guitar, not really into guitar sounds. I like the music as such. And I was scrolling through the TV, and on this random channel was this gig, and I must have hit the channel just as he hit the first chord of that. And I'm pretty sure there's a stack of Marshalls and orange amps behind him. It sounds like he's playing through the orange. There's like a lower end growl, and that first, I think it's like an A chord with the little pinky on. Yeah. Anyway, that first chord hit me in the chest, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" And then so I chased that sound up until this day. Actually, I'm still chasing that BBC Granada Studios.
Okay. Wasn't he using like JTM 45s? I thought, or something like that.
So he does, on a lot of them. But there's a few live gigs where he used oranges. Now there's both behind him. So in some of the videos you can see standing in front of the Marshall. But if you listen to the sound, it's got like a lower mid range to it. That
right.
You would have to listen to it, I think.
Yeah.
But every song on that album is just, or that live show, it's like 20 minutes long. Unbelievable. And I just fell in. Actually, the guy who owns that guitar, well, not the one who was playing in that gig, but his guitar, is a guy called Chris Blakely. And he bought one of the very first Kossoff drives that I make. And he sent me a picture of it on the guitar, That's a highlight of my career, actually, to be fair.
Yeah. No, like Kossoff had a great, I mean, that's like one of the, burst sounds, burst tones, isn't it? With him and the green one, yeah.
On that gig, the one that I'm so in love with, he's playing a 60s Strat that he swapped because he broke the neck on his guitar, on the one that Chris owns. The headstock snapped off, and I think he threw it or whatever. And then he swapped it back. But so it's like a dark bass. Looks a bit like the Dutch bass, the issue that Gibson do.
Interestingly, see, sunbursts have changed a lot, a lot. They used to be really, really pear-shaped. Because the guy that taught me, who's from Salford, Ted, and he started repairing guitars in 1958. So he went through everything really, and he used to do a sunburst that was very, very small. If you see what I mean, like the yellow bit in the middle was really small and a lot of red. Whereas now we're like all right over the switch. The switch was definitely red on a Les Paul, Which is why when you remove the poker chip, you see the ring from it. Yeah, but it's all that red has faded now, and Gibson now do sunbursts that are a lot bigger than they ever were.
Well, I got a 1960 Melody Maker that's much like that, but faded out, so you can see underneath the pick guard and stuff where the bass used to go to, and where it is now.
And it's the same with Strats. Interestingly, with a Fender, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I'm sure nobody else does. But under the bottom horn on a 3-tone sunburst, they never sprayed any red.
Wow.
If you look
Who wouldn't be interested in that?
But it's really, I think because on the vintage ones, you take the pick guard and there's no red at all. And they must have saved themselves over the years. I don't know how many pints of red paint. But yeah, they never, and you see that on fakes where they go red all the way around, but they didn't do it under the bottom horn. I
really hope the Gibson Custom Shop are doing the same thing. I don't know why, but it would warm my cockles to know that they're copying that technique.
Just saving.
Well, I think just to be vintage correct. Yeah.
Do you think the pear-shaped element is partly to do with taste over time, or also to do with the process? Because it seems to me the pear-shape is easier. I've never liked it.
It costs more paint. I bet you it's when they went through the 70s. They money saving, do a wider base, less paint. save a penny here on 1,000 guitars or whatever.
No, it's
it's
that
just-
you couldn't on a Les, especially on the Gibsons with nitrocellulose, you couldn't get light fast reds. Reds would always they'd fade to pink and then they'd vanish. Like if you look at Ford Escorts from the 1970s, the red ones are all pink now, you know. And so the red would just fade into nothing on all of them, on Fenders and Gibsons, and that's just how you see the old ones. So I think they've just ended up copying how we know how they look. You know, it's that's fine. I mean, either way, it's so much fashion, I suppose, in any all this, and the colors and stuff are so much. We're so used to certain colors and have so much association with them. But anyway,
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
getting off the subject of pedals here.
No, but it's interesting, right? No, I remember maybe a couple of years ago seeing a fade that was from the back of the guitar to the front, so the sort of bridge end to the neck, and I thought that was really unique and really new. And then I was looking through my book of old Fenders, and it was something they did maybe 30 years ago. I don't know how long they did the run for, and clearly didn't stay, and it's kind of come back around. I've seen quite a few companies doing that now, and it's just interesting that something sells suddenly and everyone buys into it like that.
Yeah. Or somebody starts playing that instrument, and therefore, you know, anyway.
But back to the Kossoff then, because this is something I remember about when I spoke to you, or I've seen from your YouTube channel. Are a lot of your pedals trying to emulate tones of things that are kind of vintage and historic?
Yeah, well, I basically the Kossoff drive is my attempt. I used to own a 1998 Les Paul Custom, a white one. Another guitar I should have never sold. I bought it in Dubai when we were on a stand down mid deployment. My wife flew out. I had a bit of money saved, and I bought this guitar. My Kossoff drive was basically me trying to get that sound from the Granada Studios gig with this guitar through just about any crappy amp I had at the time. And that's basically where the Kossoff drive come from. Yeah.
Do you know much about, because this isn't something I know anything about really, but at the time of that gig, how that would have been recorded for television? Is that just sort of mic'd in the room? Or is it...
Yeah. It's just mic'd, and you can see Paul Rodgers has got 2 vocal mics. I think he's got like a condenser and something else. Yeah, I've gone down a road with mics at the minute. I'm trying not to think about them because I get so obsessed with things. It's insane. I was up till 4 o'clock last night getting parts together to build a U87 because I can't afford $2,500. So of course I'm just going to make one. But I'm trying my best not to go down that rabbit hole because I start thinking about it all the time, and then yeah.
I can see Ray laughing. This is something that we've heard loads of builders say. They got into building guitars because they wanted this guitar but couldn't afford this guitar, so they made their own version.
That's exactly it, man. It really, really is. I mean, I think many of us are sitting here going, "Yep, that sounds familiar." Couldn't afford that, so I'll just build the damn thing.
Exactly that. Yeah, I mean,
it was so much cheaper to get the bandsaw, the drum sander, all the tools, the files, fret gear. It worked out real well.
It was fine for me. I didn't buy any of that.
So back to your pedals though, Joe. So you've got your Kossoff drive, but the one I remember seeing or people talking about at the show is the one that's on your hat, the Abbey Road Fuzz. Could you tell us a bit about that?
So I went down a journey with fuzz because for the longest time I just didn't like fuzz because I didn't use my guitar's volume knob at all. It was on 10, same as the tone. You know, I bought all the caps, all the pots, all of that jazz, and I never used them. And I discovered that I actually did something, and then fuzz come alive for me. And it's got the Abbey Road is my fuzz face clone, but it's been modified for more output, better clean up with the guitar's volume. And I play with humbuckers and P90s, so it's got to work with them. So I've dialed the EQ and stuff, added some switching options, an input transformer circuit, just some other bits to it. And it's become its own thing. And I offer it as like germanium, silicon, or a hybrid. And I'm getting rave reviews about it. Everyone who's tried it has been really positive. So I've just started building more and more and more. And as you've seen from the show, that's what most people were interested in. So it's all about using humbuckers, but it's still being able to be clean with your volume knob. I'm doing hand gestures here, like anyone can see them, but it's off camera. So
no, I find that hand gestures are important, but the thing that I'm enjoying about your channel is finding out some things that I hadn't really thought about before. So before I got into guitar building, I watched a lot. This was 15 years ago. I watched a lot of YouTube pedal reviews. Really into pedals. Thought maybe I want to make pedals, and then realised that there was more of a crossover with the skills I already had from my art background to doing what I'm doing now. So I kind of went that way. But one of the things in old pedal demos anyway was just demoing the sound of the pedal, not really talking about why that sound is there or how it's generated, or how certain things may differ between different pedals, which is something you see a lot more of in pedal reviews now, like on JHS and stuff like that. But one of the things I like with your videos, because you're often modifying a pedal, is you'll show the clip, the switch between the different diodes, the clipping, and also having it not there. And suddenly it becomes much clearer than someone just describing it. That makes sense.
I'm basically trying to show with my videos and my YouTube channel everything that I wish that I had available to me when I was starting out. So I was fortunate enough that very early on I stumbled across Brian Wampler's book, How to Modify Guitar Effects Pedals, when he was the indie guitarist. I think I've paid for that book 3 times now. So Brian, if you're watching, you're welcome. It's like £50, but it's worth it. But that book basically explained all of this just with text and a few dodgy pictures, because clearly no one had a camera on their phone back in the early 2000s. And I just try to explain all of that in as simple terms as I can, because it's all stuff that I'm interested in and that I wish I knew. I think people who actually build pedals probably look at my channel and go, what is he talking about? Like, because I'm breaking it down into how I understand it, which is, as a mechanical engineer, is kind of weird. So anyone from an electronic background probably thinks I'm rubbish, to be honest. But like, I always think of things as like a water circuit, as in the pipes come this way, there's a non-return, all of that. So I think the way that I explain it, I'd hope would translate to someone who has no knowledge on this stuff. That's the goal. Anyway.
Working for me. I'm still focused on the guitars, and like you, I need to not deviate from it. But it does make me think more about what could be done, what I'd be interested in doing with the pedals. And what it does is the same as talking to Glyn's done to me. Think more about just the circuitry in a guitar and the importance of all of that. Because I don't know if there's much... Obviously, Glyn, when you've talked about your pickups before, you've talked about the need for having the clarity of the output and how that interacts with amps and presumably with the pedals as well. And I think in the past, I've just thought about these are good pickups. I like the sound of them. I'll put them in, but not necessarily thought about why they're good or what I like about them. And then all the wiring and the components that go along with that as well.
There's a whole new rabbit hole there. So
yeah,
I'm sure Glyn will explain better than I could, but impedance and capacitance of the cable and the parts in the circuit as a whole make a huge difference. I mean, I think in the 70s, Les Paul come out with a signature model. I think they've done like 80 Sunburst and maybe 300 Gold Top, like semi-hollow body guitars that come with these low capacitance output pickups, because he was obsessed with that sort of thing, and it makes a massive difference. I actually stumbled across that from a mistake I made in work. So when I was a bit younger, I was wiring in a flood sensor. So all over the ship, we'll have these flood sensors that basically make a circuit if there's a flood, so we know there's flood and we can send guys down there. And I was wiring it up, and I had all this extra cable, meters of it, all rolled up to wire in. And I was like, why am I doing this? It looks untidy. So I snipped the cable, attached it on a course. I changed the capacitance of that cable. I completely messed up this multi-thousand million pound circuit. The ship was at sea with no protection, and everyone was like, what have you done? So I learned the hard way about capacitance and impedance and stuff. But I think it probably makes more of a difference, I would say, for you as a Glyn for pickups.
You know, to be honest, there's only really, I mean, capacitance is something I'm sure we can all go on about for quite some time, but really the only thing you need to know about it is capacitors let treble through, you know, and the value of the capacitor depends on the frequency of the treble that goes through it, really. A lot of the other stuff capacitors do, which is really cool, don't really need to know. I mean,
the cable capacitance, as in the diameter of the cable, the length of the cable.
Sure, but I can't do anything about that. From the capacitance inside the pickup, I'm concerned about, because that means you know, if you have too much capacitance, then you're losing a bit of high end. But really, what's going down the cable itself, I can't. You know, I'm selling them to other people. There's certain things like the amount of power putting out. You know, I've got one pickup that's really for doom, and so basically going into fuzz. Yeah. So that I spend a lot of time on getting the power right for that, because if it's got too much power, the fuzz just turns to fizz. You know, and you don't get the dynamics, and you don't get a nice clarity out of that. Because although fuzz is kind of anti-clarity, you kind of need some clarity as well. Otherwise, it just sounds like a tractor. So so that the amount of oomph going into the front end is. Yeah, that's something I worked on a lot.
How would you adjust that? Do you go with magnet strength, amount of turns, cable thickness? Or am I asking your secrets?
No, it's fine. Look, unfortunately, everything affects everything else. There's no volume control you can turn up. So if I put more windings on, I shift the EQ towards the bass. So the more windings, the less high end and the more bottom end. Of course, there's a point where there's too much of that. And I was like a P90 is like kind of on the edge of that, you know, it's on the edge of having maybe not quite enough top end, but it's just right. So that you can't, and if you try and get more power out of a magnet, I mean, all the magnets and the different, it's not just the Alnico's numbers are not just the strength of it, it's the composition of them. So they actually have quite a different vibe. You know, an Alnico 2 is not just a weaker Alnico 5. They're quite a different sound.
I've gone down this rabbit hole so bad.
Yeah. So really, if you decide on how much power you want to go into something, you've got to mess with a whole lot of other stuff.
That actually translates to pedals really well. So, for example, if you want a more fuzzy sound, you want more bass on the input coming in, because bass actually is going to work the transistor harder, so you have a higher input cap. But if you do that, you want to trim some of it at the end, so you'd have to adjust the output cap, and maybe if it's a clip and diode circuit, maybe you want different diodes to handle the bass or to do something with it, like for example LEDs, so then you've got more headroom. Or I think it translates really well, and it probably in every area of music electronics translates over.
Yeah, and you end up with this kind of house of cards thing, isn't it? You can't really, if you move one thing, then you've kind of got to start building the whole thing again. And I think with pickups, they appear to be really simple. You know, a coil of wire and a magnet, sweet. But there's like, well, how much of that coil? How wide's the coil? How high is the coil? What wire have you used? What insulation? Because the insulation, you know, you're multiplying everything by about 10,000 for each turn. So, you know, you change the insulation, it actually does make a difference, because there's so many turns. Anyway, I have gone on about this many times, but there's lots of factors.
I actually find in pedal building, and it's probably the same for pickups, the least components in a pedal, the more crucial those components are, and the difference it will make. So, for example, like a Rangemaster, we're talking, including the enclosure, maybe 15 components max. Every component you use makes a massive difference. Something like a tube screamer, you can, little tweaks. I mean, I'm basically tone deaf. My guitar playing, my wife tells me off all the time. She's like, "What are you doing? It's terrible." But you know, you can't hear that much difference from each component. You know, it's more like lots of components change will make a difference in the end. Whereas a Rangemaster, you change the input cap, for example, or the transistor, or the output cap, or the bias resistor. It's all going to make a massive difference.
Tell us about Rangemasters, mate, because I see you've got a few Rangemasters. You clearly like them. I've seen your website. You clearly love Rangemasters.
I stumbled onto this effect So my early tone until I found that pedal show was to get an orange Tiny Terror and EMG pickups on a ESP limited guitar. That, I mean, there's a story behind that guitar that I can tell if you want, but it was horrific. So an ESP limited guitar with EMGs into an aftermarket tube screamer, slamming into a 15-watt orange Tiny Terror, and it sounded like a stab in the ear hole without any real tone going on. And then I found that pedal show, started investigating pedals, and I built a Rangemaster, and I was just like, what the heck is this? And it was just that tone. It's like the lower mid growl. You can dial it in. If you use a silicon transistor, you can get it almost fuzzy, aggressive 70s rock. You use a germanium, like a real low gain germanium. You can get that like that mid-range squawk that you get. And there's just so much you can do with it. It is my ideal tone. I think if I had to have one effect, it would definitely be a Rangemaster. And I've gone right down the rabbit hole of, inductors on the input to simulate pickup impedance, so you can put them anywhere in the signal chain. Well, there's just so much you can do with it.
So can I ask about your Rangemaster specifically? Because we'll get back to the enclosures later, but obviously your enclosures make the pedals look different. Have you got a specific circuit that you always use in your Rangemaster, or do they all vary?
It is a specific circuit. In fact, well, yeah, I've got. So this is basically the specific circuit. So you got the board here with your electrolytic caps and input-output cap. There's the bias pot on there. This one's laid out a bit differently. I laid it out as traditional as I could because it was for the YouTube video. And, you got your 10K to 15K pot. But what I do is I'll add a switch for the input cap and also a switch for the transistors, so you can have silicon germanium. This one doesn't actually have an input transformer on it. And I also add some power filtering down the bottom here that you can see. But yeah, that would be the basic thing. But I build off that platform. So the basic Rangemaster, which you've seen on screen a second ago, the green one, that's like the lowest sort of model, if you like. That's as close to the original as you can get. And at bare minimum, I usually put an input cap switch, because if you use it in the treble position, the original position, it's not like what people would think a treble booster is. It doesn't boost treble. There's a video my friend did a few years ago. He analysed the signal. It actually cuts treble and boosts higher mids, but it's that higher mid range that gives the poke through the mix. And then I like to have like a mid switch and a full range switch on there, just for different pickups, basically. If you want to use a Telecaster with it, the full range option will let you use the Telecaster bridge pickup, no problem whatsoever.
Joe, can I ask, when you're changing, playing around with components, do you breadboard at all, or are you just changing components in and out of the actual pedal or circuit itself that you built?
So every other pedal builder in the world does it properly and will use a breadboard and professional, all this. I'm just not that guy. I'm very hands-on and visual. It's the military thing, you don't have time to practice it in the deep end. So I just change it in a pedal and building. And because mine are all one-offs, I can sell that as just one of my range. Because and even building this one, I changed the transistors in it maybe 10 times, or so
you'll play around with the actual pedal itself and change things, and then when you get it right, or you've got something that you really like, then that's when you call it done and put it up for sale.
100%, and it's all by ear. So every transistor's biased to it. I use an audio probe. I forget how I discovered them. Anyway, I discovered an audio probe which added another dimension of delving into circuits, and you just poke wherever on the circuit and you can hear what's going on at that point. So I tune it at different points. So the input cap, go after that, see what I'm hearing, bias it and stuff. Yeah.
Well, that sounds amazing.
I suppose that that negates that problem of component tolerances, isn't it? Because you mentioned a tube screamer. I mean, what have you got in a tube screamer? 40, 50 components or something. And if they're all good quality, so they're plus or minus 5%, by the end of that, you could be a long way out or a long way different.
Yeah. Well, the way I think about it is, what do we love about old amplifiers, guitars, and gear is that they've drifted over time. The smell. My wife hates that. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, so I'm very much in the camp of each pedal is its individual own thing. So if you want to buy a pedal from me, the best thing you can do is come and try them out, plug them in, and see which works best for you. Because, or get in touch and I'll tweak the pedal to your own, uses. For example, I've had people get in touch and say, "Well, I play with a high headroom amp," in which case I'd have to give the range master something to push against. Because if you put a range master into high headroom amp, you're just going to get more volume, and it's going to be not very pleasant on the old ears. Whereas if you put it driving, say, a MOSFET transistor, it's going to sound really good. So I like to tune the pedal to people's gear.
That sort of links in something that I was thinking about in relation to both Joe and Glyn here, is that you're both making things, I guess it's true of guitars as well, you're both making things where it is dependent on the other things that the person's using, the amp, the pickups. So it's interesting to hear, Joe, that you have that sort of option in some of yours where you can flip between things. And obviously, Glyn's making pickups for specific types of sounds, for specific types of players as well, which is obviously why some people would pick pickups. In fact, Ray, didn't you just get one? Did you just get that Drake pickup?
Yeah. 3 weeks ago, I think it was, Glyn. And yeah, I put it into one of my test bed guitars, and I've been loving that thing, mate. That's awesome.
Oh, good.
That's
because I'd be really interested to. It's a shame I can't play it, but a printed guitar, because I haven't ever played one, and I'd be quite interested to. And you can't do it on just audio because you have to feel what it sounds like. If that doesn't sound like a silly thing to say, but
yeah, absolutely. The best way I can describe them is a guitar that has a very hard wood. So the density of the material is usually about 1 gram per cubic centimeter, or a little bit over, like 1.1, which is like your rosewoods and things like that.
Interesting. But there's no grain direction either, is there? Because I don't know about other woods, but I know in spruce.
There is internally inside them, there is a crosshatch pattern that actually runs at a 45 on both ways.
How would it compare to the Dan Armstrong? Like the Lucite guitars, is it similar to that in tone?
Look, the reality is they're really no different. They're really not. What you'll notice with a Lucite guitar is first and foremost is the weight. Whereas with these, they're very comparable. The two Telecasters. Oh my God, I can't. There's 2 Telecasters behind me. Both of those bodies both come in at 2 kilos each, which is pretty much spot on for a standard Telecaster. So
that's really interesting, because last week Mark was saying, or the week before, he's printed off his first guitar, 3D printed the body, and he was talking about how heavy it was, the one he'd made. And how different it is to a similar shaped guitar made of any woods, really.
So some of the ones that I've built, I've as you know, I've built a lot of them, and I had to figure out ways to curb that weight back in. For instance, as you might have guessed, this one's kind of heavy. So that guy there sits in at total weight is about 4.5 kilos. I think, Brad, you handled this one, didn't you? And I don't know if you noticed when you picked it up at my place that, she's a bit of a hefty one.
Yeah, a bit of weight to it, but I lean towards, enjoying a guitar with a bit of weight in it anyway, so I was fine with it.
As far as I'm concerned, if it's heavy, you got more sustain.
So look, it sounds like what I was trying to get at is with Glyn with pickups, Joe with pedals, and also definitely now Ray with a 3D printed guitar. How do you get across when you're selling them online, for example, or talking about them online, what the sound's really like for the selling point? Obviously you can make a video of it, but then that depends on how someone's listening to it with the headphones and with the we've lost Ray. And then there's the difference if they're going through a different amp, etc., etc. Does this make sense what I'm asking? How do you make sure that your person that's buying it, your customer, is going to know this really what they're getting?
This is the great chill about guitar demos online. Pedal demos, everything. So it's all fake. I can make my pedal sound any way I want to make it sound by changing that IR I'm using with my Captor X, or I change maybe the tone on the amp. You can literally cheat people into thinking anything. The only way to do it is to find someone who you trust or like and watch all of their videos and use them as a dating. So for me, it's that pedal show. I'll watch that pedal show and I know if them boys get a sound out of it that I like, I'm going to like it in real life. I think that is the best way. And for something like my pedals, because they're all individual, the only thing I can say is I'm happy to mod it any way you like. If you buy it and it's not what you want, send it back and I'll change it. That's the only way you can do it, really. People like to say, this is how it sounds. Well, it sounds like that in that situation. Not always.
I know for me, when I'm watching people demo, whether it's guitar, amps, pedals, whatever, I always kind of like the ones where it's just an obvious mic in the room. So, it's not the mic at the front, or, when they stop the direct feed and it's just the microphone on their phone that's, you can hear the amp through that. They're kind of the ones that where my ears prick up and I can imagine myself in the room rather than listening to it through headphones, through a computer and all those kind of things. But yeah, it's really the times, when I've been looking to buy particular pedals and you watch all the reviews and listen. It's the ones where I hear a room sound, even if they haven't done it on purpose. They're the ones that I kind of really like.
Yeah, what I find is no matter what pedal I use, it sounds like me, which is a shame, and that's just how it is, because the fundamental thing is there's a monkey operating it, and that's the sound that's made.
I think for myself, I take a slightly different tact to what you guys will, in that because there's so many misconceptions and beliefs about 3D printed guitars that they sound like crap, or they sound plasticky, and I'm still trying to figure out what a plasticky sound actually is. So where you guys are trying to define how your tone is different, one of the few videos I've got up is that I try to explain to people that basically it's actually kind of boring because it doesn't sound any different. It just sounds like an electric guitar. And I've had a lot of people who they talk about how it must have terrible tone or anything like that, and I go, well, look here, have a listen and watch this video. And I then get a response back, a few minutes later going, well, yeah, look, I mean, it sounds like an electric guitar, but the tone is a bit weak or it's a bit mid-rangey. And I'm thinking at this point, you know what? Go to hell, man. You're just looking for something to pick at. And maybe I had my mid control at 5 instead of 6. But ultimately, when they come back to me like that, to me it tells me I've done my job. They can't argue with it. That the guitar does not sound plasticky. Again, I don't know what the hell a plasticky sound is.
Ray, do you find that different parts and pickups suit the printed guitars better than say like other parts and pickups? For example, if you have a bright wood, maybe a humbucker would suit it over a Telecaster pickup and stuff.
No, I haven't really found anything like that at this point in time. I guess to an extent, I find different types of polymers have different, sort of different sounds. We actually did a live stream about that, the new debate of, tone plastic. But that in itself, to me, just kind of drove home that at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff really doesn't matter. Like we talk about, different woods having different, sounding better than other types of wood. And in your instance, it would be, germanium is better than silicon and silicon is better than germanium. What I think a lot of people tend to forget here is that tone, at least as far as I'm concerned, is an absolute matter of opinion and opinion only. Now, before doing what I do now, I used to do, I did 20 years of high-end car audio, and you'd get people arguing over which type of speaker sounded better. These tweeters sounded bright, these ones sounded, smooth and things like that. And the best way that I used to explain it to people was that if you tell me that you believe a $30 tweeter sounds better than a $300 tweeter, you're not wrong. At the end of the day, you are not wrong. If you think that it sounds better than the $3,000 or $300 tweeter, you're absolutely right, man, because to you, it does. I think you're an idiot, but you're not wrong.
So I've had this the same debate over capacitors, resistors, and old parts and stuff. People say to me, "It's in your head." Like, fantastic. If it's in my head, it's real. It's all psychosomatic. If I believe it's better, then it is better. Whether that sounds no different, but it makes me feel good inside to know that a certain part is a certain thing, then that is going to make me feel better, which will then make me play better, which means the sound will be better because I feel better. Ipso facto, it's better.
That's 100% what I think with my guitars, which are about the look of them. If you're playing a guitar that looks a certain way and makes you feel a certain way when you're playing it, you're potentially going to play a bit differently. So I totally buy into that, Joe. And with the £30 tweeters, Joe just made a video with a Joyo Voodoo Octave, which I've had a couple of. I think they're brilliant. But it was interesting in the YouTube comments, people basically slagging it off. Lots of people think it's rubbish. But again, it's just not what you were doing, Joe, but the actual bass.
Yeah.
It is just a matter of taste. If you like that sound and it works for you.
Yeah. Related question I've got for probably Joe and Glyn, the capacitors on a tone pot, $7 or $8 for orange drop capacitor, or a 20-cent one from the electronics store. Are we wasting our money on one, and what should we be doing?
I've done some experiments. Now I'm not sure if it's going to work the same in an active circuit as it does in a passive one, to be honest. I made, when I was repairing guitars, I made myself a box that had pots on the outside, no marking. So there was 250k pots, there were 500k pots, and there was like a 5-way switch at the end, which would switch between different capacitors. In fact, there were different makes of capacitors. They had some really old ones and some really cheap ones, blah blah. And I actually lent the box to a few players to say which do you prefer, to find out without totally blindfold, and they all came back with different answers, which was kind of odd.
I've got some real big thoughts on this that'll probably annoy everyone. So I'd love to know if people listening and will write in the comments and let me know if they think I'm talking rubbish here. But anything going to ground, I feel like it doesn't matter. If your capacitor goes through a pot and then to ground, it doesn't matter. But in the signal path, i.e. like the old style, like a coupling capacitor in an amplifier, that makes a massive difference to me. And it probably makes more difference which end you've got the foil end. The foil end has to be pointing closest to the ground source for it to have less noise. And the type of capacitor will matter. So in a pedal, it matters, say, a little bit on your coupling capacitors, the bits that join the circuit together. In an amplifier with lots of voltage, it matters a massive amount to me personally. Like I've just built 4 train wreck rocket amplifiers. One One of them had a modern output transformer. Two of them had the same ones that Ken Fisher used, and another one had a one that Neve used back in the day. It was one of a kind, and that sounded the best. But the coupling capacitors in all of them were different, and they sounded massively different. And I changed between them, and the sound followed the capacitor. So to me, it makes a difference if A, there's high voltage, and B, it's not going to ground. If it's getting shorter to ground, the only thing you're maybe going to know is the sweep of it if it's a different value capacitor. I.e., you test it, and that 10 NF capacitor is actually a 12. That will make a difference. But when it's in the circuit itself, if the capacitance is the same and there's no ESR difference, if it's the same electronically in every way, if it's a coupling capacitor, it'll make a difference. Going to F no.
And so what I'm hearing, the 20-cent ones are fine, because I just ordered some the other day, and it's one of those, for me, that if you're building a guitar and there's $1,500 worth of wooden components, $8 for a capacitor isn't much for the total cost of what you're spending. But when you're ordering a handful of them, the 20-cent packet compared to the $8 packet adds up to a big difference. So I'll be putting the cheap ones in the next few guitars and seeing if I can tell the difference.
However, if you're selling the guitars on, then having an expensive capacitor can actually be a selling point. Because people, and again, there's probably a psychosomatic thing. If people go, "Oh, I've got oil and paper in my guitar here," then I'm going to play really well. But personally, for me, it makes a difference. And I would often change capacitors for people. People would bring them into the workshop and say, "Hey, I've got this. I've just bought this, whatever, Bumblebee or what have you," and I'm like, "Oh, okay. So you use the tone control a lot?" No, I don't use a tone. Right. Okay. Well, I'll put it in for you then. But anyway.
Yeah. But also, there's some people that can hear much, much more than, say, for example, someone like myself. Like, it was Eric Johnson. He can hear if you've got the light, the bulb on your Fender amp, which way round it's in. There's one way that sounds better to him. And he can blindfold test and he can tell. He'll be able to tell you which way, because his hearing is so much more acute than all of us. Probably not, if you put it up on your screen and analyze the signal, you'll be able to see minute changes. He can hear that. I can't. But also, we hear with our eyes. If the capacitor looks better in the guitar, it's better.
Yeah.
And if it's an Ajax blue molded capacitor, they are the best capacitors in the world. It is better if it's that. They've lasted in Fender amps for years in high voltage situations, and you virtually never go bad. So that it's future proof as well. I mean, for the guitar, it won't matter because it's passive. But something like an amplifier, if you're putting them in, they will last.
I think I'm the opposite of Arran. I've been sold on buying the more expensive ones now.
Sorry.
I thought me and Joe just agreed with each other. I thought there was a consensus there that in a guitar it doesn't matter.
No. I'm sold on the expensive ones for the mojo of selling the guitar and saying, "Hey, it's the expensive caps."
I feel like you're missing a trick, mate. You should be doing your artwork on the cap as well. The cap should be like a weird capsule of some kind of magic.
Yeah. You know what? I read this great article years ago. It was Nigel Tufnell, who I'm sure we're all familiar with, Nigel Tufnell, and he had little knitted things to put over your tone control. It was a tone pot cozy to keep your tone nice, give you a nice warm tone. So there you go. You could put a little tone, a capacitor cozy, a little cap on the cap to give you a nice warm tone.
Well, do you know what? I actually think all of this makes a difference. And I learned this at a real early age. I used to be into BMXing when I was like 8 years old. I was massive into like the dirt jumping and stuff. I'm a scaredy cat now. I would never go on a roller coaster. How I used to do it, I don't know. Anyway, I had this really expensive bike that I loved. And then eventually you get bored of it. And I got bored of riding bikes and I wasn't interested. But then I put a new sticker on it. It'd be like, this is the best bike ever. And I'd be out there for hours jumping and like, I can jump higher now. And that was the same thing, even as a child, without knowing it. Changing the look of something made it better. It's a fact.
Yep. I totally agree with that.
It's like a long guitar strap, you know? If you think you look cool, you will play cool.
A long, thin one.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah.
Like Slash, really uncomfortable, make it really hard to play.
You can get close to banjo straps if you go too thin sometimes. So just take care on that one.
See, I've got these wide padded straps that I use. for my feeble shoulders, sorry. And yeah, I feel better playing them because it's so comfortable.
So I've just got a real great gift off my friend Todd from the Guitar Knobs podcast. He sent me some fabric that his grandfather brought back from World War II. So it's from China. It's like 100-year-old fabric. He wanted pedals covered in it. And he sent me like just enough to cover the pedals. It's like this really expensive fabric. And I was absolutely bricking it, making these pedals. I did it on camera for YouTube, but I didn't film that bit because I thought no one wants to see me sweating to death, or would he? Anyway, I sent him the pedals back. He was really happy. And he got me a Mother Mary strap made of this fabric. So my Les Paul has got a 100-year-old Chinese fabric Mother Mary strap. And that definitely improves the tone, 100%.
So just to backtrack a bit, with pickups, I found when I recently was trying to find a set of pickups that I could use for multiple things, for multiple guitars. So I was going to buy into buying a number of them. So I wanted to make sure I was getting the right pickups. In the end, I didn't make a decision. But what I noticed is on a lot of websites, they just say it gives you this warm tone, it gives you this whatever tone, and it's not really very descriptive. But what I like is, for example, with you, Glyn, I know you're currently working on these extreme metal pickups, and you talk about how you test them and going back and forwards with someone that plays that sort of music. And when I read that a pickup is designed with a certain type of music in mind and has been tested with that sort of music and is used by players of that sort of music, then that works better for me than someone describing the tone of it. That makes sense.
You got to do both, I think. And I also try and tell a story about because there is a story pretty much with every pickup. Like this one's been years and years not quite getting made, and now it's looking like it's going to happen very soon. So yeah, and sometimes I need a bit of help because I don't play every kind of music to any proficiency. There's some stuff I do great, but there's stuff like I don't play country, I don't choose to play country, and I don't really understand it and what sound I would like. So I've had a test pilot in for that. And then extreme metal is something. If you isolate the guitar track, it's brilliant. Get the drums out of the way because that double kick thing is too much for me. So I've got an expert who's a studio guy as well, and so he's got real amps, but he's mainly a modeling amp modeling, which is kind of what most of those guys go for these days. So so that's a great way to test for me. And then that one I probably won't gig myself. Like I gig pretty much everything, but I probably won't do that. But it's up to him.
That I think that makes sense, and that to me then sounds like a reliable pickup that it's going to do the job we're expecting.
Yeah, because what's interesting is the world is very, very different when you're next to a drummer. Like because when my instinct is to make neck pickups with a more bass than I actually the ones I sell, because when you get into a band situation, the amount of bass coming out your neck pickup's quite crucial, and if there's too much, you've just got a woofy. It's either woofy or woolly or it just doesn't work. As soon as it's bass and drums, you kind of got to keep out their way a little bit. So I nearly always end up making the neck pickup, taking it to the drummer, and then backing it off. Having to rewind it a bit softer. So I think it's really, for me, for what I do, I think it's really important to be in a band situation with it. So
I think the fact you play live regularly maybe helps you think about all of that as well. Someone that I mean, I'd love to play live again, but I'm just getting back into playing more, and I just want to play at home, so I'm not too worried about the how my sound's going to fit in a mix. But back to how I pick pedals, I've just been, partly because of Scott from Bonehead Guitars going on this thing of buying loads of pedals, I decided to totally relook at my bass pedal board, because I'm going to be playing at home, not live. And I want something that can help me just experiment more when I'm playing and doing some ambient things and various other stuff. So I've been looking at pedals and reviews of them, and not necessarily looking for sound demos, but just demos of the range of things they can do. So, for example, I've just bought a new pitch shifter, which was the TC Electronic Brainwaves one, because it does a lot more than my old pitch shifter does, which was really great for live. It was a MXR based one, did a perfect job, but for playing at home I want to try some other things out, and this can pitch shift at not just octaves, at other things as well. And then a few other pedals I bought particularly because of the range of options I've got on it. Maybe then down the road I'd look more for tones. But one thing I did notice when I was watching videos is, to help me understand the tones, I've got a synth pedal that I love, a Digitech one, and I was looking at other bass synth pedals, and some of the demos just sounded absolutely brilliant. I was thinking maybe they'll be better than the one I've got. And then I saw someone that just did a comparison where they played the same riff through the different pedals, and I could see that actually within the way they were fiddling with their pedals, when it had my one, that one that I've got in it, I realized that maybe it is what I want, not the others, because I could see the direct comparison. But when I'd seen them separately with people just demoing the pedal on its own, it was hard to know how it compared to anything. So I quite enjoyed those comparison pedals videos. But anyway, what I was wondering is, that got me into thinking, I'm into at the moment pedals that allow me to do strange things, pitch shifting, stuff like that. I just wondered what you guys were all into. Obviously Joe's mentioned his fuzz, but is there anything else that you particularly like or look for when you're buying a pedal?
For me, probably, yeah. All right, go Ray.
I know for myself, like when I was younger, I was I used to have this thing that I had to have the latest and the best, and I had to use what everyone else was using, and that was really cool because I sounded like everyone else except for myself. And then, as I got a bit older, I started working out my, the tone that I wanted and things like that. And some of the choices that I ended up making, sort of mystify some people. Like, for instance, phase pedals. I'm a bit of a fan of electro harmonics pedals, and for me, it was the small stone. I love the small stone. However, there was the two during the 90s. There was the two types. You had your Russian-made Sovtex, and then you had your American-made EHX pedals. And I tried the American-made one, and it was just it's not bad. And then I tried the Russian-made one. It was just like this is the sound. This is the sound that I'm chasing. And of course, it was the cheap one, so it's just like this doesn't make sense. And now I'm finding myself currently, I am on this cheap pedal kick, basically. So I don't know what I'm aiming to find. I don't know whether I'm trying to convince myself that cheaper pedals are the way to go, or that there's, like the most recent one was the California from Joyo, which was supposed to be sort of like it's a rectifier, your double rectifier sort of sound amp modeler. At the end of the day, though, I'm sort of finding they've got a range of those, and just about all of your cheap brands have their own types of things. They're basically cloning other pedals, because that one is apparently a clone of a Tech 21 pedal. At the end of the day, I'm just finding they're just a different type of overdrive. And that's kind of about it, but I'm still collecting them all. Got to have them all.
Actually, Ray, so I got one of the Californian ones of those Joyos a few weeks back. Because and I tell you what,
that's a California one.
I couldn't see the orangey brown one.
Oh yeah.
No, it's not Californian. Yeah, American. It's called American. Yeah, it was supposed to be like
the American
tweet deluxe-y kind of thing. But what it's really, really, really good for, the reason I got it, I put it at the end of the board, is I can DI into the PA with that. So it's just basically for me. I got one as an insurance for. I run on like a an amp, a 1973 valve amp, and it's like, oh, a valve got broken just at the end of a gig 6 months back. I thought, well, I need a contingency plan here, and the contingency was I'll just use the other guitarist's rig, and he'll just have to sing. But yeah, I got this, and actually through the PA, it works really, really well. The DI into the PA, yeah. So I can at the end of the pedal board, and then I can just pedal board. I haven't luckily had to do it at a gig yet, but I've done it at practice. Just gone straight in, and it's been great. So that for me, that's why they were really useful.
Yeah. So where I've actually found it useful is I'm a very high gain player, but I'm also, if you look at like at my pedals, there's 3 drive pedals, and they're all on. But my actual, my drive is set at, anywhere from a third to about halfway. And that's where I'm liking that, basically. So like that California pedal into a tube screamer, and then basically straight into the clean channel of the little 1-watt Marshall that I've got. Gives a beautiful, deep guttural tone, especially using the drag pickup. On the same hand, I feel really sorry for the preamp valve in that Marshall. It's getting hit hard. It's getting hit really hard.
For me, I think pedals. I like playing around with the gain stage pedals. I've got the modulation. I've got chorus and analog and digital delays. But yeah, most of my pedal collections, different tube screamers, fuzz face and super overdrive Boss pedals. So that's what I kind of enjoy the most. So I'm not a high distortion sort of player. So the 3 that I probably use the most, I've got a tube screamer, like a clone, and this one here, Joe, which you'll be happy to see.
Yes,
that's a mid 90s fuzz face.
I love the sensible size.
Yeah, so decent size, takes up a fair bit of room on the board. But yeah, they're the I just enjoy playing around with the different gain combinations you can get with different levels of gain. That pedal, when as I said, I bought it probably mid 90s before they had all the variations, that you could get. And I remember, I think I was like 19 or 20 at the time, and thought, I'll buy this and I'll, max it out and plug it through any amp and it's going to sound amazing. And I was so disappointed as a young man playing that one, because I just didn't understand, how it works in conjunction with volume on your guitar and different amps, and, that the whole feel of it. And yeah, I've said it a number of times before to different people. It's probably only the last 10 or 15 years that I've really understood how it's meant to work and really enjoy, playing it. Was, when I spent a lot of savings on it when I first bought it, I regretted almost, the moment I got it home and played it through my amp.
Menno in the chat just asked, have any of us actually tried a Klon Centaur?
Real one?
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I have. I've just been to that pedal show and played through their rigs, and obviously Mick's got one. It sounded terrible because I was playing, so I don't know what the fuss is about.
Yeah, one thing. Sorry?
No, Glyn, after you.
Oh, I've just got a sort of theory about pedals, and please tell me to shut up. But I reckon they should all have blend controls, especially bass pedals.
Isn't adding a blend control to any pedal just making it a bass pedal? Look, it's a bass version.
So I used to have a Boss LS2, so I could, is it LS2? The one that I could basically make any pedal into a blend pedal. So I'd put that in the loop, and then I could have the clean going for it for my bass. And it made such a difference. And the new setup I've been trying to make sure that if I'm using pedals that don't have a blend, to put something in to allow it, because I definitely feel like being able to take any effect and get some of the clean back in some of the original tone back in is so important. And it makes such a difference on all effects, I think.
It does if you can play the guitar. If you're trying to mask out your sound, it's better without the blend on. For me, though, for pedals-wise, I like big, expensive, extravagant, rare. I take the back off and look at it before I even plug the thing in. With that said, my favourite 2 drive pedals at the minute are both SMD components. One of them's the TC Electronics Mojo. So if anyone's looking for a cheap overdrive, I'm currently modding one now, but it sounds that good. You really don't need to. And they cost next to no money and they're so well built. Fantastic. And the other is the MXR 2-key drive. Don't know if anyone's ever tried that. It's fantastic. Like, such a good pedal. It's like the Billy Joe Armstrong signature. Well, they've released one called the FOD, which is named after one of his songs. But that was to get around the fact that it's a Billy Joe Armstrong signature and no one wants the artwork on it and stuff. But that thing is fantastic. It's like they took his 2 amplifiers, Pete and Meat, I think they're called, the 2 Marshalls, and tried to emulate them with an analog circuit and then put a blend control between the 2. Fantastic.
Wow. See, I get through a lot of overdrives. I've got, like, my board is, in fact, my gigging board is like, there's 5 overdrives and a phaser.
So,
but just for different flavors, and I mean, there's a tuner, but so it's like a hot cake, crowd the hot cake. But everyone in New Zealand has a hot cake on their board. You kind of have to, really. And he's a lovely bloke. He lives just in Auckland down the road there. But yeah, the hot cake's pretty much the basis of it. And there's clon stuff, and there's other stuff, and overdrives come and go. But yeah. Do
you guys like the expensive diodes in the clon and then turn the gain down so you're not using them? Is that how you?
No, mine's my kind of. I use that. I've got a soul food that's been modified by somebody or other to be more clon-like, although they're pretty clon-like to begin with, I think. And yeah, that's my less drivey one. But
how do you order them?
Nice. Sorry.
How do you order them? Do you go high gain to low gain, so you're boosting, or do you go the opposite way around?
I muck around quite a lot. At the moment, I've got the hot cake going in, which is a higher gain going into a lower, going into the I call it a clon, into the soul food, and that seems to work pretty well. I quite like that.
That whole principle works with pedals too on the insides, because basically every stage of a pedal is its own little mini pedal. It's like, each transistor is its own boost or whatever. Put them together and it makes a, overall effect. So like if you've got 4 transistors in your pedal, there's 4 overdrives in one just feeding into each other. And I tend to like having, a unity gain at the beginning, i.e. a buffer. And then after that, higher gain, lower gain, lower gain, lower gain. And I stage them in that sort of fashion. So that kind of makes sense.
On my board, high gain to low gain. And I've got a boost pedal, and I've got that at the end. So just to boost volume into the amp, rather than more distortion. So just that, solo boost rather than a boost into a gain pedal to make it gainier.
So Joe, where are you on the whole buffer nonsense?
You need both. Yeah. Everything works and nothing works. Depends on your rig. So if you've got lots of Boss pedals that have a buffer in and no switcher, you don't want to be putting a buffer at the beginning of your signal, because another buffer isn't going to make it better. But somewhere in there, if you're driving a long length of cable, then you're going to need a buffer. The clon buffer, funnily enough, whoever mentioned the clon in the chat, that is a really simple circuit, and it's an amazing buffer. That the parts on it are really inexpensive. So anyone could make a clon buffer and put it in a tiny box as an always-on pedal in their circuit or on their pedal boards. It's a simple thing to do.
The TC Electronic pedals I've just bought all have a buffer that you can switch on or off in.
Yeah. I think it just depends on your rig. If you've got lots and lots of pedals, then you need a buffer in there somewhere, because you're going to lose some high end. Or if you've got a long cable, or if you're Jimi Hendrix, he had a coily cable to counteract that sort of thing, because he wanted it to be, he's running crank Marshalls with a bright strap. He wanted the sound to be duller, and probably same with Brian May. So
interesting.
What you're trying to do. Everything makes a difference.
On my board, I've got the Gig Rig Quartermaster, the 8 patch one. So it's sort of the pedals are going in and out. But yeah, I've got a TC Electronics delay pedal, which I've got the buffer on that one, just as that bit of safeguard that when it's on, at least what's going to the amp is sort of buffered just in case.
When I first started building pedals, I built the is it this Alembic Strato Blaster? It's a buffer pedal anyway. And I had no clue what I was doing. I was just building circuits that I found online. And I built about 8 of them, plugged it in. It's like, it's broke. It doesn't do anything. Throw in the bin, build another one. And I did that about 8 times before I realized, no, a buffer doesn't change the sound.
There's a question in the chat from Eddie about splitting wet and dry signals from a guitar. And what I've just started doing is, with this new weird board setup I've done, is thinking about it being stereo. And quite a few of my pedals have a dry signal and a wet signal. So what I've been doing is sort of cascading things. So the dry signal will go in, say, to the right amp, and the wet signal goes to the left amp, and then on the dry signal I'll put some other effects on. So they sort of you can use one pedal, switch it on, and it will have the distortion, say, going to this side and not to that side, but that side will have a different effect on it that's coming through the dry signal. And it seems to be quite interesting how it's working, but I need to fiddle around with it more. Like Glyn said, I like to just keep changing orders of things. But I'd never really thought about these pedals that have a dry and a wet signal before, and why I would ever use it unless I was recording and wanted a dry signal for recording, until I thought of this idea for the stereo. But I wondered what any of you think about this idea that Eddie's mentioned about splitting wet and dry.
I've just changed my whole board around the what's the reverb pedal that's built out in Australia by a guy called Loki. I've just put on my the polyverbs.
Poly effects, yeah.
So funny story, I bought the polyverbs as soon as I seen Anderton's demo. I think I've got serial number 10, which makes a difference to me and it makes it sound better. I don't care what you say. The lower the serial number is better. So I rebuilt my whole board around it. So I have my drive pedals at the beginning. Then I have the Gig Rig, the Gig Rig splitter, and I go through all my wet pedals with one side, and then it goes into the left channel of the polyverbs, and then my dry signal goes through a different delay, and then into the right channel of the polyverbs, and then it comes out stereo as well. So you've got wet dry, but the dry side has got both reverb and delay on, as well as on the other side. It's insane. But when I got the polyverbs, I read everything that you can find online, because I'm that guy who gets obsessed. So as soon as I bought it, and while I was waiting, I read every single bit of information on every forum that you could find. And on a lot of the forums, they actually said that there was defects with the first couple of them. That, it wasn't working. So when I built all this rig, I made a switcher so then I could change it between mono and stereo, because I was like, maybe I can only run mono, so I'll be able to switch and change the pedal into a mono pedal, fine. And it didn't work. Nothing worked. And so I emailed Loki, being an idiot that I am. Sorry, Loki, if you're watching this. And said, mate, your pedal's not working. I've done all this, it doesn't work. And he'd give me some stuff to try, it didn't work. And then I just took my switcher that I'd made myself apart. And instead of using a stereo jack, I'd used one of them jacks that mute the signal on the opposite side. So really what I was doing is just muting the signal. So I thought maybe I was going to email him back and say, mate, it was your pedal that fixed it. I thought, I can't do that, sorry. I emailed him back and said, never trust your customers. I messed it up type thing. That was my journey on my pedal board anyway.
We need a whole episode on pedal boards at some point.
I built so many, and I'm like yourself. I don't play live. I play at home, and I'll make a pedal board, play it twice, leave it looking nice in my studio or whatever, and then 2 weeks later come back, pull it all off, and do it again for no reason other than the process.
We want to have that.
Are any of you?
Oh, sorry, Brad.
So I was just going to say, any of you running like any of the big multi-effects style, or you're all locked into like the individual pedals?
Not me. I'm individual pedals.
So I'm individual pedals, but
yeah, me too.
After going to see that pedal show, Dan said to me, "Why don't you make a multi-effects pedal?" So I did. So this is start from the start. A range master with the EQ switch, a cutoff drive, which is your bluesy overdrive, an anchor drive, which is kind of clean boosted, almost fuzz. It does the lot, and then a delay on the end, and it's all apart from the delay, which is wired on Faro board. The rest of it's all tag board wired. It's absolutely full. It was ridiculous. It's actually got an NKT 275 in the range master side too, and I didn't want to do it because Jam Pedals do their multi effects analog thing, and I said to Dan, I don't want to tread on their toes, and he was like, "Do it." So I did. But I ended up getting a few orders for these. I didn't think anyone would buy them because they're really expensive and they take a long time to make and stuff. And as soon as I put it out there, I was inundated with messages of people saying, "Can I have this spec? Can I have that?" Amazing. It's just crazy.
So does that mean you obviously you build some pedals and sell them, but it's a lot of what you're doing made to order? Someone puts an order in, then you build it and send it off.
Yeah, I'll do. I normally shy away from that, and this sounds really ridiculous now that I'm living at home and I'm here, but I would never take an order in the past because I get drafted to sea a lot. We've not long been off the coast of Murmansk in Russia, or was in the Red Sea for a long time. Before that, the South China Sea, and I thought I wouldn't want someone to put a custom order in, me take their money and buy all the parts, and then not come home, and my wife have to deal with it. So I was like, I can't do that. But now I'm home all the time. It's fair game. I'll put any image on a pedal. If you want a certain tweak to a circuit, you want two pedals together. I built a lot of people want like the OCD since full tone folded with a different pedal. I'll do that. Anything.
Yeah, I was going to say about your pedal enclosures there because they're all handmade and painted different. How cool I think they look. But when I saw you saying you go for nitro on all of them. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's some of the colours that I can't get in nitro, I'll use like anything really, and then it's always nitro lacquer as the final coat. But generally, I tend to stick to the classic colours, Sonic Blue and stuff like that. I've also found a car body shop that'll make me colours up in nitro. So I currently got Kawasaki green. I love them old motorbikes, the pearlescent green on them. So and I do source out colours. There you go.
Is that mainly? Well, to me, the nitro and the look of it adds to the kind of vintage feel of your pedals as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like to age them, and if you're going to age them, then nitrocellulose is the best for that. And also, they kind of pick up their own age along the way, and I like that too because like my guitars are all battle scarred and beat up, and I kind of like that, and that's what I like my pedals to look like too. So. Yeah, I would hate. See, when I was younger, when I was maybe like 19 or 18, I went to a New Year's Eve party, and I was that vain that when I got there, someone was wearing the same top as me, and I can't handle anyone being the same. So I went home and got changed and come back, and I'm like that with pedals too. I just can't.
Well, it does make them unique, and I like the fact that you say you can customize them for someone, the image, etc.
Yeah, well, I did the Hackney Guitar Show in London. It's like a pop-up guitar show weekend before last. They're really good. If you're ever looking to do like a short guitar show, you basically pitch up at a pub and set up your table and what have you. But the guy who's running that has actually ordered a delay pedal in shell pink with his kids' pictures on.
Oh, cool.
I'll put any picture you like on it. Well, within reason. I'm certainly not going to put anything illegal or offensive on there, but and offensive is subjective. I'm in the Navy, so what I consider offensive is probably not what most people consider offensive. Yeah, I prefer it when someone comes to me with an idea and they're very articulate with what sound they're after and how they want it to look, because otherwise I'll just go off on a tangent. I mean, I'm sure it's probably the same for you guys building guitars. Like if someone just comes up and gives you a vague, "I'll have a blue one, please," with P90s. It's harder to achieve.
It's interesting how some people are so different with that, because for certain people, being told do what you want but make it blue would be perfect, and for others it isn't. And it also ties into a conversation we've been having a bit with the issue I've potentially been having with how to progress my guitar building, which is I like making one-off for customers, but it's not really, especially with a guitar, it's not really a good business model because it takes so long, months of work. Whereas if I'm making multiples of a guitar, I can do them all in one go, and it doesn't take as much as doing, like, making 3 guitars in one go doesn't take as long as making 3 individual custom guitars. It's odd. Everyone wants different things, but I prefer it when someone comes to me and says, I've got this idea, can you help me realize it? And then you work with them to work out exactly what it's going to be.
I think it's the same for pedals, because for example, that pedal there took me maybe 3 weeks to make. Whereas in 3 weeks, I could make 15 Kossoff drives, no problem. And I couldn't charge the person the amount for the 15 Kossoff drives because it would put it out of reach. But for the next 2 years, the Navy are paying me 50 odd grand a year to make guitar pedals. So I don't need to charge the money at the minute. So the custom thing, it makes sense to just charge sensible prices and do it for the love of doing it.
When I've talked to guitar makers who find themselves in the problem of making a one-off bespoke instruments and then can't get out, would like to have a range, to make a range because that's how you make a living more easily, but they can't get out of this thing, and they keep quoting, and people are, what would it cost with a Floyd? What would it cost with this? What would it cost? And and then they go and buy a Mexican Strat. But anyway, to get out of that situation, because I talk to lots of guitar makers because I sell them pickups, and it seems to be the best way out of that is what you do is you keep doing your one-off bespokes, but you say, I'm going to do 4 a year. And what I'm going to do, this is a limited thing, only 4 a year, and the rest of the year you're doing your range. And I'm going to take photographs of every stage. I'm going to talk to you at every stage of it. You're going to have input at every stage. It's going to, and charge an absolute premium for it. Now, all that stuff they were doing anyway.
Yeah.
They're not doing any extra work. That's actually what they do. They just put an extra value on that.
Yeah.
And it's a limited edition, and I think that potentially for you, Joe, is a future, because you have to kind of figure out what success is going to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something else you've said before, Glyn, which ties into that, which is in my mind about why to charge a lot more for a one-off, which is you were saying, I'm sure it's you that said this, if you're going to make a custom pickup for someone, you normally have to make 4 pickups before you get it right. So you need to charge for 4 pickups. And roughly. And I've just found that with this guitar I've been working on for so long, which is, it sounded quite straightforward, but it was so complicated. And I've ended up literally making it 4 times. And it's because it was something I hadn't done before. And that's what I need to do when I'm making one-offs. Accept the fact it's going to be like making 4 guitars.
It's the same. It's the same with pedal. Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I said my exception to that is if the one-off pickup I'm making for them, I think is something I can produce more and more of and sell and put on my website and sell ongoing. Yeah. In which case I'll go, yeah, cool, okay, I'll do that. I'm just going to charge you once, for a pickup, which I did recently with a Music Master bass pickup, because the Music Master bass was a 70s Fender cheap bass, and there were 6. They basically put a Strat pickup in a bass, so the poles didn't line up. I mean, it was just, that's what they did. So just basically made a 4-pole version of one of those. But that seemed like a good idea and an easy, low-hanging fruit for me. So that's what I did, and now that's on the website.
I say to people all the time, you're not paying me for the germanium transistor. So people say, why have you added £50 to the price for this transistor when they cost £20 each? Like, well, you're paying for the 10 that didn't work. Yeah. I don't went and spent. I mean, behind me there, you can just see at the back at a Pi radio. I paid £105 for that radio because some of them, not all of them, have an NKT 275 in. Now, I haven't opened that one. So at the minute, it's the cat in a box that's dead and alive. So I'm saving that to open on camera. Just to see, but people are paying when you pay for the NKT 275 in the pedal, you're paying for the 20 of them that I've bought that didn't have them in, or the transistors that were out of spec.
That's one thing I found interesting on your YouTube channel, the way you're testing. I just assumed everything that came in would work and be right, but you're testing them all. Yeah.
Even new capacitors and resistors and stuff. Maybe not so much with new resistors, but definitely capacitors. When you get them on the meter, the ESR and the capacitance is different, 100%. Yeah, so you've got to test everything.
And same with pots, isn't it? You know.
Oh God, that's a rabbit hole and a half.
Yeah, they're really like 500k pots.
Do you have a favourite?
For pot value?
Yeah. No, as in
depends what
modern brand.
Oh, I haven't been through a whole lot. I mean, CTS is what most people expect. So I don't repair anymore, but when I was doing that, I just use CTS pots, occasionally Bournes, but just because that's what everyone uses. If Gibson use it, Fender use it, I'd use it. So I didn't go through a whole lot. There's
a brand over in the US, Vintage Inspired Pickups. They do the VIP pots. So they're one-to-one replicas of the original Central Lab pots. Now, I've gone down this rabbit hole. All of my guitars have them in now. And the 500k ones are 550k. So the good old pots are the ones that were, there's a bit more carbon on the track or whatever, because they were built to, it's probably a Friday and someone had been out on the lash the night before or whatever, put a bit more on. But they make replicas of them Central Lab pots, and they're built really, really well. They're stupidly expensive, but
but you can get 550 CTS pots. And if you buy 500s, chances are one in 6 or 7 of them is about 550. But I mean, I have 500. The ones in my test guitars for humbuckers have 500k pots, and they're almost cock on 500k, because that's
is that just for a datum?
Sorry,
is that just to have a datum, so then you know where you're
at? Well, and then I can say, yes, these are designed around 500k pots. I mean, really, if they've got like 480 or 530 or something in theirs, it does make a difference, but it's not massive. The carrot, it's not going to make a pickup a bad pickup by that, So yeah, I just do that because, like you, I have a fussy side to me, like where you feel it's going to be just right,
It's just the
take away is. Sorry.
It's just the chase. I like the chase of the odd components. You give me a bag of capacitors, I'm going to go through and find a value that I think I want. You may put them all in a circuit, and it sounds no different, but to me, I know.
Yeah. Funny, yeah.
Hey, so look, we've been talking for just over an hour and a half, and before we say goodbye, I just want to quickly, Joe, talk a little bit about your YouTube channel, if you don't mind, because cool. I've mentioned I found it fascinating. Let me just share the screen with it all. But maybe you could tell us a bit about the regular podcast you're doing now over there.
Yeah. So I am basically on board a ship. My job as a chief engineer would involve a lot of instructional work, like teaching people about systems and different procedures when stuff happens, or how to fight a war in general and stuff like that. I would do a lot of stand-up instructing in front of people. And since coming away from warships, I really don't get to do a lot of that. I'm in HR at the minute. They've got me sat behind a desk, which is like a weird world for me. And I needed an outlet for that sort of thing. So my mind behind it was, let's combine guitars or pedals with teaching, instructing. So now we're doing a podcast where we walk through certain circuits. So it's not really so much as a meet and greet podcast. But what the plan is, we're going to get, next we've got a tube screamer work through. My friend Simon from JSA Effect Pedals is coming on to talk through the tube screamer. And we'll go through the circuit and explain what each part does, discuss the components to look out for, our own opinions, and do it that way rather than meeting the builder and saying, who are you and what you do. We're going to dissect either one of their circuits or a vintage circuit. And this is my way of teaching, basically.
I mean, I watched, it must have been this one, the Fuzz Face one with John from Space Wolf. Yeah. So John's big in the recording industry over in America. He's worked in studios, he's worked in radio stations as an engineer and stuff like that. So he's had quite a varied experience compared to me, which is, I haven't been in the music business at all, really.
So I think between the two of us, we have like a different angle of coming at things, which is quite interesting.
I mean, I found it really interesting, but like over my head in many levels, because there was an access for certain people that have that understanding. But yeah, it was brilliant, really enjoyable. But then I've just seen.
I forgot that one was going live.
A new one's just gone live. There's a link in our video description to Joe's YouTube channel, but one about the metal zone, the Boss Metal Zone.
I really fancied modding this pedal for the longest time. Since that pedal show did an episode with Simon Neal from Biffy Clyro, and I absolutely love Biffy Clyro. And on his board, he had one of these pedals that he'd set the EQ on, and he's like really paranoid about anyone touching it. So he said going to gigs, it would be like, don't touch that pedal type thing. And I thought, I wonder if I can mod that pedal, find a mod that's out there that would change that. So then the EQ is a bit more forgiving, or, you know, and I dive into that there anyway.
So a lot of your videos are modding pedals, and sometimes it is like a mod that's quite different, and sometimes it's changing over components to cook more vintage.
Well, I've done a few build videos as well. So like the treble booster, the Rangemaster I had out before, there's a build video for that, where you can just build that pedal yourself. And I give away every single secret and tip and trick that I use to build my expensive pedal. You could, you know, go to Miles and buy pence components and build yourself. I would love to know if people do watch any of my videos and it's something that really annoys you or something that I can improve on. I'm all ears for people, you know, that classic British thing of tell me what to do and I'll do it. Let me know what you think and I'll improve it, because I'm at the early stages now. I've only really been going since April. It was the first time I started posting regularly and trying to build this up. So it's pretty new. That's
cool. And you've just hit 1,000 subscribers, right?
Yeah, 1,000 subscribers.
That's brilliant.
Pretty quick. And what I found is looking at my video analytics, because being an obsessive compulsive guy I am, of course I'm going to look at that, is that the points where I'm waffling on and I think, come on, Joe, you're going a bit boring there and a bit deep. You know, talking about sine waves and different diodes and why they clip and what happens. That was actually the most popular part of the video. People are skipping back and watching it again and stuff. So that's interesting.
Well, when you've got your niche and your niche audience, and then maybe people like me that don't understand it yet, those things are fascinating, and that's what draws your attention in, I think.
Yeah, my wife's amazed. She's like, who knew that there was that many boring people in the world that find what I find interesting? And I'm like, what are you talking about? My wife's like 10 years younger than me, so she's from the generation where everyone's always had a mobile phone type thing. You know, she can't imagine going to a phone box and hoping that someone's coming out to meet you where you're going to meet or what have you. So, it's a different world. She doesn't understand all of this. She's like, why can you spend 2 hours talking about a resistor? Like, come on.
Well, on that note, I recommend people go and listen to Joe talk for 2 hours about a transistor at some point. Yeah, and listen, as always, thank you all for listening. One thing that I just want to quickly go over is what we've got coming up in the next couple of episodes. So Menno, who's in the chat at the moment, just trying to sort out a date with him to come on. But next week we've got Mark and Steve from Ferritone Studios, who I know Joe knows as well. They've been demoing his pedals a bit.
They are the best people ever. Let me tell you, Mark, just quickly. He actually got my pedal on that pedal show. He went out to Lee Anderton's 50th birthday bash and basically worked the floor promoting my pedals. He's just such a nice guy, and they're the best humans ever, and hilarious. Probably the most. He did a skit where he like pretended to phone me up and pitch me pedal ideas. If everyone hasn't seen it, please search it out on YouTube. Where he says, "Hello, is this Joe from Hello Sailor? I've got a pedal idea," and it's hilarious.
Well, we've had Mark on before, so it's good to get him and Steve together. But yeah, I've heard them with other people as well, how good they are at pushing small brands and promoting people. It's great. The week after that, we've got Eddie, who was also in the chat from Electric Lady Guitars, coming on. He is the person that I've talked about this before, but one of the things I really like about his builds is some of it's from the wood and the trees right next to where he is. So I saw a photo he sent me the other day of a new chainsaw he's got for chopping down his trees. But he geo marks his guitars as to where the tree's been felled from. And then we've got Bobby Jarvis Jr. on, who's a guitar player and teacher, so we can talk about sort of guitar design from his point of view. We've got Paul from Mild House Studios, who everyone was quite keen on, which is great. We've just sorted out a date as well for Stu, one of Arran's friends, to come on as well. And he's also, does he build pickups and pedals, Arran?
He's a pedal builder, and actually Joe knows him. Joe, you did the Xenomorph pedal with Stu, if you remember that.
Yeah, absolute legend that guy is. Yeah.
Yep.
So he has a real knack for like modern circuit building. Like he can see my chicken scrollings of a circuit and put it into a PCB in almost record time.
I'm quite keen, I think, to try and get on more regularly people that are not quite guitar builders, but maybe get an amp builder on. That'd be good. Amps, pedals, and also I'm going to try and get some more acoustic builders on, because that seems to have gone down well recently with people. And as always, I just want to thank everyone that's supporting the show through buying the t-shirts, through super thanks and things. And then we've got the membership. A few of you guys at the moment are actually members. So we've got Ray, Custom Unlimited, thanks, and Brad and Glyn. Thank you for that. And Arran, amazing. And then we've got Owen, who's a regular in the chat, Eddie from Electric Lady Guitars, Simon, who was in the chat earlier, and Dave from Footstep Guitars. All of that, I'm like really honoured that you're supporting it. It's really great, really helpful. Okay, well, until next time then, hopefully, if you're listening on audio, you can leave a little review. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment so we know you've been here. See you next Thursday at our normal time of 1 p.m. BST. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
See ya.
See you later.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi. Oh, and as always, we've got a little bonus feature. I don't know why it won't end.